A local man who received the world's first kidney transplant from a pig has died. Rick Slayman received the groundbreaking transplant at Mass General Hospital. He left the hospital a month ago, and at the time, Slayman said he was happy to get a clean bill of health and hopeful to live life without the burden of dialysis. The 62-year-old from Weymouth had end-stage kidney disease. No word on his cause of death. Mass General doctors are currently working with the FDA to begin clinical trials involving pig kidneys.
Good morning. It is May 14th. The feast of Saint Matthias, who is the one who replaced Judas among the 12 apostles.
And this particular period has dealings with the time of the end. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him.
On the 14th of May 1796, English physician and scientist Edward Jenner purposefully infected 8-year-old James Phipps with cowpox in order to test the process of vaccination.
The founding of the State of Israel in 1948 followed a United Nations recommendation for the amicable departure of British forces from Palestine. Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, proclaimed the state's independence on May 14, 1948.
On this feast day of St. Victor and St. Corona, we take a look at the latter, who is gaining new attention, of course, as the world battles the COVID-19 pandemic.
You can hear literally every hit, every note.
Subconscious is motivated by emotion, right? Not reason. We need to find a way to translate this into an emotional concept.
How do you translate a business strategy into an emotion?
This, and so that we make sure we use the right sources, we use them. Freemasonry's web pages itself, the Grand Lodge of the British Columbia and Yukon, and they claim over here the evidence in favor of a Masonic initiation previous to Napoleon's assumption of the imperial title is overwhelming. The initiation took place in the body of an army Philadelphia lodge of the Ecosias, primitive rite of Narbonne, the third initiation of École Communique, being an advancement in the rate these initiations took place between 1795 and 1798. This is fascinating stuff. So in the years prior to this push, secret societies were being formed and gathered into their ranks those that would play the major parts in the final events. Because the battle is for your mind. Organizations such as the Jesuits and others were deeply involved in the formation of secret societies and actually controlled them behind the scenes. So in actual fact, these kings, the king of the north and the king of the south, were sitting at the table behind the scenes. Now, Napoleon and Freemasonry, they say it was never, there's no absolute proof, but they claim that obviously he was. And what did he do? Always by their fruits you must judge them. August 15, 1769, this comes from the Freemasonry webpage as well. Napoleon Bonaparte in Corsica, trained in the military schools in Paris, was promoted to general after the siege of Toulon. He led the troops into most of Europe. And in 1798, Egypt. Isn't that beautiful? Returning to France, he was nominated first consul after the revolution of the 18th Brumaire. Napoleon founded the Bank of France. Now, I want you to take note of what is happening here. We're getting an entirely new political system in the world. One that moves the emphasis from the religious sphere to the secular sphere. And in the culminating years afterwards, secularism seems to rule and seems to have pushed the religious out of the way. And behind the scenes, things are happening. New structures are set in place. New organizations, new forms of government. And eventually the tables are reversed, and the king of the north overruns these mindsets because they have induced in the minds of men a longing for something higher. Very fascinating possibility. He founded the Bank of France, reformed the tax system, restored the church, no more dominance of one group of churches over another, improved the education system, and in 1804 assumed the hereditary title of Emperor of the French. The following year he was at war with Russia, Austria and England. In April 1814 he was forced to abdicate and exiled to Elba. He attempted to regain his empire in 1815, was defeated at Waterloo and banished to St. Helena and died 6 years later. Now if we go to the history books and we look at the International Napoleonic Society, we find something else that's very interesting. Napoleon and the Jews. Napoleon was the first leader in Europe to grant liberty, equality, and fraternity. And those same watchwords became the watchwords for another nation that would receive a gift from France, namely the Statue of Liberty, and would introduce those same systems of thinking and governance into its midst. And he gave this to all religions. And this lithograph here represents Napoleon granting liberty to the Jews. Napoleon's uncle, Cardinal Fesch, also got involved. He told Napoleon, "Sire, so you wish the end of the world to come with your laws to give the Jews equality like the Catholics? Do you not know that the Holy Scriptures predict that the end of the world will happen when the Jews will be recognized as a corporate nation?" Fascinating stuff. You see, up until that time, Protestantism had filled the world with the mindset that the papacy was the Antichrist. And now suddenly the Antichrist as a political entity disappears from the world scene, and his power, his political power, is removed from their sight. Where's he now? Isn't he going to bring about the final events? He dives underground. He doesn't disappear as a church. He remains a woman. But secret societies spring up everywhere. And these secret societies are founded by the very people that now have disappeared. And then they forbid people like Roman Catholics from joining some of the societies, like Freemasonry. And then when the objectives have been achieved, they unban the societies, as happened under John Paul II. This is interesting stuff, but here's a new worldview coming along. A new worldview. You see, the Jesuits had taught that the Antichrist was yet future, and that he would arise, and that he would intimidate the Jews, the church not being there anymore, but having been raptured. And all eyes, therefore, should await the coming of a Jewish kingdom so that the promised Antichrist could come.
The issue in prophecy is who and where is the Antichrist now. Once that the person perceives the reality and the manifestation of this prophecy, they'll know the rest according to the scripture. But when a person is blind to the reality of who the Pope is, and the Pope is granting every favor to every other denomination, they'll believe that the Pope is not such a bad guy at all, after all.
What about the work of Alcazar and Rivera?
Rivera and Alcázar, they were to work, and then later Lacunza. There is more, but I will mention these three, the most important ones, in dealing with one special area, prophecy. They were assigned to deal especially with prophecy, with the purpose to do two things at least: to cover up any prophecy relate to the origin of the Antichrist, and relate to the papacy, relate to the Antichrist. And second, to cover up any idea that the Roman Catholic institution was never a Christian church.
And now most people don't actually know about this. They continue to say, now here's an amazing incident which is not generally known. When the French troops were in Palestine and besieging the city of Acre, Napoleon had already prepared a proclamation making Palestine an independent Jewish state. It didn't exist. They were going to establish it. He was unable to realize this project because of the intervention of the British. This proclamation was printed and dated the 20th of April 1799, but his unsuccessful attempt to capture Acre prevented it from being issued. The Jews had to wait more than 150 years before their state was proclaimed. The proclamation, however, did bear fruit. It was a precursor to Zionism, heightening awareness of the cause of the Jewish statehood. The ideas Napoleon expressed found the admiration of many who saw Napoleon's gestures as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, which foretells of the restoration of the Jews to their land. The idea drew many adherents, especially in England. Here is a seed, a new philosophy being planted in the minds of men. Now, the one who actually started this philosophy is Napoleon. At the time of the end, this philosophy, this secularization of the world, will push the king of the north out of the way.
You have something more elegant in mind than shooting me in the head? A kick.
What's a kick?
This, Ariadne, would be a kick.
And then behind the scenes, things can happen, while to the minds of the people, they see something totally different.
The last step is to apply the day-year principle used within biblical historicism, and you get 1260 literal years. Ezekiel 4:6, I have appointed thee each day for a year. These three time measurements that all equal 1260 literal years was fulfilled from 538 AD to 1798 AD.
Now, what's interesting about this period is that if you don't use it, then most of the prophecies in the Bible become nonsensical. So if there is a principle involved here, then that principle must be uniformly applied. For example, if you take the 70-week prophecy, which you find in Daniel chapter 9, it follows the prophecy of Daniel chapter 8, and there you have specific time frames. From the going forth of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, and then follows a very specific time prophecy. If you make it literal, it becomes useless. But if you apply the day-year principle, it works out exactly to the Messiah, Jesus Christ. So it's very important that you apply the day-year principle, or else prophecy becomes nonsensical, and you can do anything with it, whatever you want. So the reformers applied the principle and came to the conclusion that the time times and a half represents 1,260 years. Now, they were doing it with foresight. We have the advantage of doing it with hindsight. And if you look at this time period, it is a fascinating time period, because the papacy as a horn power could only be established with the fall of the Ostrogoths, and that took place in 538 AD. Now, if you add 1,260 years to that, you get to 1798. Now, what happened in 1798? Napoleon ended the political power of Rome. Didn't lose its ecclesiastical power, but lost its political power. And the papal states were confiscated, and a secular government was established in Italy. So, from 538 to 1798, Rome ruled as a horn as well as a woman, a church. So for exactly 1,260 years, it exercised political power, and then it lost it. Daniel 11 verse 40, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. Now the time of the end being 1798, the end of the 1260-day prophecy. History tells us that Berthier, the French general, entered Rome and took the Pope captive, and by decree of Napoleon declared that the Papal States had been dissolved and that a secular government was put in its place. So secularism overran or pushed him out of his position. For religion, Napoleon ended the schism and restored the Catholic Church to France by the Concordat of 1801. So the Catholics couldn't have been that powerful. They were removed from power. Where's the Antichrist? He ensured freedom of religion and equality to the Protestant sects, and he declared France the homeland of the Jews. After it became obvious he could not establish their national home in Palestine, the code Napoleon established, equality before the law, emphasized the sanctity of the family and assured the legal gains of the revolution. The Code of Civil Procedures ensured widespread use of mediation in the courts and laws, and the courts were secularized. We move from religious dominance to secular dominance. Napoleon's religious opinions were the height of modern philosophy. This is what the Napoleonic Society writes. He was completely given to tolerance. Everywhere that Napoleon went, he led tolerance by the hand. Everywhere that he found several religions, he ended the domination by which one took precedence over the other. This sounds marvelous. Faith, Napoleon would say, is beyond the reach of the law. It is the most personal possession of man, and no one has the right to demand an account for it. Doesn't that sound marvelous? And people had been sick and tired of religious fervor, religious intervention, religious suppression, religious laws, and here comes freedom. Now, what if eventually you can lead this freedom into chaos so that people can ask for the pendulum to swing the other way?
Positive emotion trumps negative emotion every time. We all yearn for reconciliation, for catharsis.
Have you ever thought about it? That the British, who were the saviors of Europe, allowed ships to be filled with Jewish hopefuls who wanted to emigrate to the West, how they wouldn't let those ships pass by, and how eventually they were all herded towards Palestine, and the Jews had to settle in a land that had nothing. Well, it's interesting. You have to create a national identity. You have to create national heroes. And we dealt with that in previous lectures. I don't want to go into it. And eventually, where did they end up? They ended up the leaders of the nations. And a new nationality arose, and a new nationalistic, Zionistic pride arose, and a nation arose. I feel sorry for them. They have been hounded and herded. It is unbelievable. And this man was the lackey of his Pope. And I'm not going to deal with that. And this man was maybe the same lackey, sitting at the table, behind the scenes.
And then quiet. This is like wild. I don't know how you do it. I mean, it's beyond, all that stuff's beyond me, but
I don't know how you do it.